always know we're almost home when we see the Kymin. It's almost like going to the seaside, first to see the sea, first to see the Kymin on the way back. You know, on the way back up from Newport, you spot it standing up, the little white building on the top of the hill. Yeah, the roundhouse.
You can see the roundhouse from the Brecon Beacons, you can see it from the top of Raglan Castle. You know, once you have a clear view, you can see it from enormous distance, of course, can't you?
And there must hardly be a house in Monmouth town or garden from which you can't see the roundhouse. So no wonder it's in people's everyday experience, it's part of their...
If you walk into Bartley's Bank, there's a big picture of the roundhouse. There are companies named themselves after the Kymin roundhouse, local companies. Yeah, you know, I mean, it really is probably the icon, really, of the town, isn't it? It's the most obvious, I think, you know, to people.
Yeah, and people love it and they're proud of it, and even if they don't come up here very much necessarily, some people are quite frightened of the windy road coming up here. It's still, you know, part of their Monmouth experience.
It is always comforting to see the white house on the hill illuminated and to know we are nearing home. Most of our community recognise the fact that Kymin is here.
I came to the Kymin in 2003 to work for the National Trust and look after the 10-acre site.
We're all aware, I think, of how much the Kymin means to the local people around here in Monmouth, and I found that particularly rewarding. And that even though we've now left the Kymin, the effect of that for us personally still continues.
Originally the land belonged to the Duke of Beaufort, who owned so much land around here. And there were a few cottages, about 5 cottages I think, from which he gathered rent. Then he began to sell off his lands in Monmouth, and the Kymin was one of the parcels of land sold off. A group of local gentlemen came up here for a picnic, as they used to do, and liked it so much that they thought, oh, we'll come back next week and we'll have a picnic again. And so it went on the following week and the following week, until one of them said, this is Wales, I suspect weather's going to get inclement very soon, so why don't we club together, build a little shelter, and then we can picnic at our leisure whenever we want.
The sort of people who could afford leisure time, they would make a day of going to the top of the Kymin and seeing the Naval Temple, the memorial, and the roundhouse itself, which I think was a sort of meeting place, a sort of gentleman's club.
It was really, I suppose, an early form of the Rotary Club. Originally there was a playing field up here. This was the town recreation area, and then a small group of gentlemen decided it would be nice to have a dining club at the Kymin. And a chap called Mr. Roberts built the roundhouse in 1794, and at that stage it had a kitchen and a banqueting hall and a flat roof on the top. Charles Thompson was the MP for Monmouth at the time and presented a telescope which he put on the flat roof on top of the roundhouse.
It was only for the privileged and wealthy at the time. When they weren't there on a Tuesday, you could hire the place and have a cup of tea there, but it was very expensive for most people. Philip Meekins Hardwick, who was the treasurer for this so-called Kymin Club, and the rest of the club had his portrait painted to say thank you for the work that he had done on getting the site assembled, and they hung it in the dining room, which is the top floor, and the old kitchen was in the ground floor of the roundhouse. And there was they called her, quote, an obliging and attentive woman called Mrs. Sara, who was the local housekeeper and would come up before they arrived, set the tables. The food had been sent up from local inns, and the gentleman took it in turns to pay for it and have it sent up, and she would, make sure it was laid out properly.
In the days of horse-drawn carriages or walking, very inaccessible.
Well, that's why he had to build the road. That's what his wife insisted.
So it would just have been tracks coming up that side of the hill. I mean, that road was put in later. So what they did originally, it was apparently to get the Duchess of Beaufort up here, but it was to make it more accessible, and particularly for ladies. So they built the stable.
And the National Trust applied in 1999 to have those developed as accommodation for the custodians of the roundhouse.
Which was the house that we lived in for 18 years, which is just over there in the corner. And they put in a carriageway, which has totally disappeared now, but that followed what's now the Wysis Way and connected down to the Staunton Road, which was a well-known coaching route anyway at that time. So that they made it more accessible. It would still have been for the well-to-do. I mean, it's quite interesting because we've actually had censuses going back a long way on the hill, and the kind of social demographic of the hill has changed enormously. It's obviously a very middle-class area now with quite, obviously some very nice houses. It was anything but at that time. It wouldn't have been seen as a very desirable place to live because of the access.
No water either. I mean, you'd have to go quite a way to the well.
And we've actually got the remains of lots of bovies actually in people's gardens. I mean, people were living really in quite primitive sort of bovies, often making a living either charcoal burning or collecting firewood.
1802, Nelson, Lady Hamilton and Sir William Hamilton arrived by boat from Ross to the sound of the 2 long 4-pounders being fired across them, and were met at the quay by the instigator of the Roundhouse project, the Mayor of Monmouth, and the Monmouth Band, together with the militia. He didn't dine at the Kymin on that day because he came back subsequently and had breakfast. He is reputed to have commented on the quality of the view that we're still enjoying today.
The other person that we know quite well associated with it is Charles Heath, who was a local publisher and printer who's buried in St Mary's Church. So a lot of the information we've got about it comes from his book, which is all written in this wonderful flowery Georgian language. And we used to have that displayed up on the walls in there. And some of it's very, very emotive about what the Kymin in the area and the view here means to people. I mean, one thing he talks about is a phenomenon that we've seen very often here, where the sun sets over there in the west and the moon rise at the same time. And particularly certain times of year, it tends to be around the equinoxes, which are particularly good in autumn. Yeah, and he says how this was an amazing spot to actually watch that. And can you remember the language? He describes it very poetically. He does it to the actual experience, doesn't he? Yeah, I know.
Somebody rang me up and said, you would looking at the Kymin, weren't you? Do you know anybody who can make sure the light gets turned back on? Because it's so nice to see the light up in the Kymin, which I can see from my back garden, but not at the moment because it hasn't been on.